Hello, everyone. Welcome to our panel discussion on xenophobia. Everyone knows what's been going on with the COVID-19 crisis and the pandemic, but one of the, you know, uh, one of the consequences that we've seen from this pandemic is a rise in discrimination towards the Asian American community, and also just the Asian community and globally as well. Um, Reading through some things, there was a man who, was walking down the street and he came across someone who said, you are a reminder of the disease, right? He said that you are a reminder that this disease is in our community. And in another incident, there was a family who were stabbed in Texas, and in another incident, we had a woman spit on as she was leaving the gym, and slurs being used and things like that. And we're seeing this rise because of this disease. But I think this sort of insidious current has always been there, and now we're really seeing it in the news. We're seeing it in the media more so than we have before. And so I'm really glad that we're getting to have this really important conversation. And we're really happy that you're having this conversation with us, OCCJ. And if you are not familiar with OCCJ, we are a nonprofit in Oklahoma that focuses on creating dialogue and creating spaces where people can have authentic conversations about race and bigotry and about discrimination. And our vision is that we plan on eliminating bias and bigotry in our state and in our generation. And moderating our panel today is Moises Echeverria, who is our CEO and president. And he is a graduate of OU-Tulsa's Human Relations program, which is a fantastic program that we also have one of our professors a part of. And he's also just a general, wonderful, intellectual, and kind person. And I'm going to go ahead and give this over to Moises to introduce the rest of our panelists.
Perfect. Thank you, Avery. I appreciate that. I am very excited and very thankful to have three wonderful individuals who are doing fantastic work. And so I'd like to introduce the three of you. First, we have Jennifer Thao, who is a Tulsa native. She holds a master's degree of science in healthcare administration and is a certified Lean Six Sigma Green Belt professional in the banking industry. She served as a crew leader for the Tulsa Young Professionals Diversity Crew. And that's where I first met her. And through her service there and other opportunities, she has facilitated multiple community events highlighting different Asian American demographics in our city. She is a first-generation Vietnamese American whose parents arrived to the US in 1975. She is also fluent in Vietnamese and has a passion to travel internationally to learn about and experience different cultures and traditions. So Jennifer, we are delighted to have you. Also on the panel, we have Dr. Brenda Lloyd-Jones, an associate professor in the Department of Human Relations, teaching graduate level courses in organizational studies. And that's where I met her when I was working in my master's degree. She earned a bachelor's degree in communication disorders and a master's degree in audiology and speech language pathology. So her career started in the field of audiology, working with pediatric and geriatric populations. Because of her interaction with individuals of various ages in the hard of hearing and deaf community, her appreciation for human diversity continued to grow, and her passion for social justice issues was rekindled and strengthened, which led her to obtain a Ph.D. at the University of Tulsa, focusing on leadership, education, and research. She has many scholarly publications, including journal articles, books, and book chapters. She is also very involved in the community. She was a graduate of University of Tulsa, and was recently honored with the Paragon Award for Community Leadership. She also has been recognized with the Mayor's Commission on the Status of Women Award for Public Service. She is the founder of the Mothers Group, Inc., an Oklahoma-based nonprofit committed to increasing the love and proficiency in reading among underserved children. This organization was named Outstanding Nonprofit and featured on the cover of Tulsa Kids magazine. This is very exciting. Dr. Lloyd-Jones is also a guest expert for a weekly segment called Therapy Thursday on CBS. So I hope that you get a chance to watch her segment. And last but not least, we have John Thao. John is a Tulsa native and the oldest of 8 children. He grew up in East Tulsa, where I met him when we both attended high school at East Central High School. He is the first person in his family to attend and graduate from college. He obtained a bachelor's degree in management, concentrating in nonprofit organizations and entrepreneurship. And he also earned a master's degree in education with a concentration in student development, both degrees from the University of Tulsa. John has taught English and lived abroad, and he lived in Laos, Thailand, and China. John is part of the Hmong American community. His parents came to the US as refugees from Vietnam. I think this is really neat. He was a Fulbright scholar and was in the first cohort ever to teach English in Laos at the National University of Laos, which is the university where his father dreamed of attending when he was a young boy before the war. And I'm sure that your father is very proud for that. He currently serves as the academic counselor for the TRIO Educational Opportunity Center program, as an educational consultant, assisting non-traditional first-generation low-income adults and helping them get started with college. He also serves as president of the Oklahoma TRIO organization, providing leadership for other academic counselors throughout the state, and works closely with the TRIO National Organization. So again, thank you to the 3 of you for joining us today. So Avery framed our conversation very, very nicely. And I just want to add that on March 19th, the Asian Pacific Policy and Planning Council began tracking incidents of discrimination and hate against people who are Asian American in the United States. In less than a month, they have received over 1,000 reports. They created a report for the first 2 weeks, and stating that they had received about 100 incidents every day. So the question to the panel is, how do you think this is impacting us in Oklahoma? And even more targeted in communities like Tulsa. And I will let anyone can jump in and answer.
Well, I'll start off with saying that I think before COVID-19, people with Asian descent already had types of hate crimes against them. While they weren't mainly targeted, I believe that it was happening quite a bit. I think that a few weeks before COVID-19 hit Tulsa, we had incidents here locally. And while we kind of see what's going on right now, my biggest concern is how it will look like after COVID-19 kind of stabilizes. Is that going to stay? Is that going to increase? What does that look like? It just really depends on how the media portrays this information as well. Sometimes, depending on the light the media portrays these hate crimes or publicizes or highlights it could either be in a very negative or positive way. It could justify why some people would respond certain ways, and then it could not.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think you bring up 2 really important things, which is this has always existed. Discrimination against people of Asian descent has always existed, but it's just being highlighted now because of the current situation. And then the other really important point that I heard is the role of media in communicating and helping, whether helping or hurting what we're seeing. Does anybody else wanna answer this question on how it impacts us in Oklahoma?
I'll go. Moises, and although I've not read or heard about any hate crimes experienced by our local Asian and Asian American residents as a result of COVID-19, we do know that hate crimes and racially motivated incidents are underreported. Because those who are targeted often fear becoming involved with law enforcement, and they want to avoid becoming further victimized. According to the Census Bureau, the Asian population in Oklahoma comprises about 70,000 people, and here in Tulsa, approximately 15,000. So as Tulsa community members, we want to remain vigilant and aware of the issue and guard against mistreatment of our neighbors of Asian descent. And in addition to checking on them and asking how we can support them, we want to address negative conversations and hate speech when we hear it. Verbal abuse, physical abuse, and emotional abuse is wrong, and it should not be tolerated.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that, Dr. Lloyd-Jones. John, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, and full disclosure, I'm no expert or anything, but I can definitely share in regards of my personal experience and what kind of impact it has me personally. Mm-hmm. I know I don't speak for the rest of the Hmong community or Asian community, but from my perspective, there can be very severe and also subtle impact happening here. I know in the past few weeks, I've reached out to a lot of my Asian friends from different ethnic groups and just checking in on them. And I think in the midst of COVID-19, some of them have experience of very passive aggressive and also microaggression situations. So, for example, being asked where you're from, and then I had a particular sibling who was asked, after she was washing her hands, did you wash your hands well? And things like that really leave an impact. And also, it's not to an extent of violent hate crimes, but they're very subtle and microaggression crimes where people are being effective about the virus and based upon, being Asian.
Sure.
I know for me also too is both my parents have to still go to work, and I worry about them when they go to work. And so I don't know what kind of situation they're in at work, if people are being, very discriminative towards them because of them looking Asian. So, and then that's also an issue in itself, because if I try to bring that up with my parents, I don't know if they'll be comfortable or they don't want to reiterate the trauma that they may have experienced. And that's where it gets really, really tricky. And I don't know what to do in that situation. And so things like that have definitely impacted me in personal level. And I can only imagine what's happening with the Asian community as well.
I really want to echo, because John has a really good point, especially with my parents. I'm now I'm a lot more hypersensitive now when they say, "Oh, I went to go get groceries." I'm just like, did anyone say anything to you? Did anyone look at you? I mean, you have this overfill of questions that to them may not be as important, but to you, it's just caused me to be a lot more hypersensitive around just basic trips, basic life trips, essential trips.
And I think both of you highlighted a really fascinating aspect of xenophobia and acts of discrimination. And it's not just the hurtful act and what it does to that person that is receiving, that's on the receiving end, but it is the fear and the anxiety and all the emotional distress that it causes in the community as a whole, because just stepping out of the door, being at work, going, like Jennifer said, going to the grocery store, is there's that fear, like, is someone going to discriminate against me, be violent against me, like John said, do a microaggression. And I wish we had more time to unpack microaggressions, but I'll just say really briefly, those are very small interactions, sometimes unintentional, sometimes intentional, that are really hurtful and harming to an individual. And even though in the surface that may seem small, when an individual experiences microaggressions multiple times a day, every day of the week, for years, that really takes a toll on them. So thank you all for your answers. I want to ask, I want to talk about the word xenophobia for just 1 second. Xenophobia is not a word that we use on our kind of everyday vocabulary. It's not something that we normally use in our conversations. But and so because of that, that's a word that's often misunderstood. In its most simple form, xenophobia means fear and hatred of strangers or foreigners, or anything that is strange or foreign. And I will even add anything that is perceived to be strange or foreign. So the next question is for Dr. Lloyd-Jones. As a scholar in the human relations field, why are human beings so prone to exhibit xenophobia?
Yes, according to psychologists, the brain naturally takes in information to form associations and generalizations to really simplify the world for us. And so these processes lead to formation of implicit biases. And additionally, as humans, we are inclined to mistrust people who do not belong to our community or our group. And we are also socialized to prefer people who are like us and are part of our in-group, if you will. So we often are conditioned to distrust those who are dissimilar to us, and we tend to consider them as part of the out-group. Subsequently, we may learn to be suspicious or even fear those who dress, speak, or think differently than our group does. And equally important is what perpetuates or preserves xenophobia. And the media oftentimes perpetuates negative stereotypes of people, which can multiply one's fear. Also, members of one's social or peer group can communicate xenophobic thoughts and act out xenophobic behaviors and influence others to follow suit. So in a nutshell, one's upbringing, peer group, the media, and even religious training or teaching can contribute to xenophobic thoughts, as well as perpetuate those kinds of behaviors.
Thank you for sharing that. John, I want to ask you a question. In your role as an academic counselor, can you tell us how you've seen xenophobia affect students that you work with?
Sure. To be honest, given that we have moved to working remotely, I haven't seen any regards of visually seen any situations of xenophobia, and I haven't run across anything from the students that I work with, but I can only imagine some of the things that may be happening. But then I know what I have been doing is expressing my support and concerns to students, not only that, colleagues and employees at TCC about xenophobia and people being discriminated and based on racist situations. I wouldn't know more. I don't know in regards to statistics or if actual people are experiencing that specifically at TCC. That'll be something, definitely a question to ask our civil rights compliance office to see if there has been a rise. And I can only imagine it may have.
Yeah, in some of the research that we've done, we have seen that even though individuals are not sheltering at home, or whatever the circumstance, they're not out and about as much. These incidents continue to increase, and they're being experienced at the grocery stores or for essential employees who have to still go to work, or even just kind of like people walking their neighborhoods. Even incidents being reported where people's homes people in their homes are receiving some of these xenophobic remarks. And I read of the incident where someone left a note on someone's house saying, "We don't want you here, and your virus," and this and that, and they signed it, "Your friendly neighbor." So yeah, it'd be really interesting to see, to continue to monitor those. Jennifer, the next question I want to ask of you. You have done a lot of programming that highlights areas of the Asian American community, and you mentioned in your opening remarks that xenophobia has always existed, and that this is nothing new. But so what has been your experience regarding xenophobia?
I realize that at some level there's like this underlying xenophobia. I mean, typically, if you're not, like Dr. Brenda Lloyd-Jones had said, if you're not familiar with something, you tend to kind of shy away. You kind of back up and you're not comfortable with it, which is typically what instigated me to start putting together programming that does highlight the Asian American community in different parts of it, especially the under-highlighted pieces of it. My experiences is that typically those who attend those programming are typically those who are already self-aware, or kind of already know what's going on and really want to be proactive about how they respond. And this is again my personal opinion, I mean, the ones that we want to come and experience, we want the whole community to are typically the ones who don't. But yeah, my experience with the whole programming is typically the people who go there are engaged, are aware, and they want to be self-aware.
Excellent. I want to take a little pause right now and remind those who are watching that if you have any specific questions that you would like to ask, you can type them on the comment section, and our staff is going to be sending those to us so that we can have the panelists address them. But I want to ask next, if you know, any of you know of any resources that the audience and people in the community can use to become better informed about our diverse Asian community, and ways to show their support.
Here at the University of Oklahoma, we have the University of Oklahoma Confucius Institute, which supports Oklahoma educators in their efforts to teach the Chinese language. They also offer after-school programs as well as summer camps for students. Additionally, they offer language courses as well for adults. And so that's right here in Tulsa, here at Schusterman Center.
Excellent, thank you, Dr. Lloyd-Jones.
I have a very soft part of my heart for this question, because my mom used to own a grocery store and here in town, and that's always kind of been my source of reference, whether you want to go and learn about who's hiring or what's happening or who's going to hold a small little get together or just little things like that. Grocery stores have always been, in my opinion, that little hub because everybody needs groceries. And my parents typically go there because, you know, they have a lot of Asian food. And so going there and just, you could see people talk, well, back then, back in the day, you could see people talking to each other and, you know, catching up with each other. And so I've always seen grocery stores as a way to, one, give back to the community, and two, learn a lot more about what's going on. You know, Tulsa is very fortunate, and I say this twofolded. We don't have a lot of Asian grocery stores, but we do have some grocery stores. So different Asian descents will typically go to, you know, that multiple stores to get their stuff. And so you could really see what's happening in the Cambodian community. You can see what's happening in the Vietnamese community. In my personal opinion, grocery stores are kind of that true source of truth.
Excellent, thank you.
For me, being an educator, I think there's actually a lack of resources for the community to learn about the different Asian communities here in Tulsa or in Oklahoma. And more specifically, so when you break it down to ethnic groups, there isn't curriculum or there isn't history being taught about the Hmong community, the Vietnamese community, the Burmese and Zomi community right now, which is really big in the Tulsa area. And I think it's very important, especially for educators, to really reach out to those community to learn about their history, their language, their customs, to be acquainted and learn how ways they can support those communities, because every community has their own need, challenges, and struggles. And it's very critical to understand that, because we often think about resources if we're thinking about Asian resources, we often think about and reference back to very popular Asian groups like Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, and a lot of the other ethnic groups are being left out. And so I think that has to be addressed, and then how to provide those resources can be the next step.
Yeah, and you know, John, you bring an excellent point. And I think of, you know, of my educator friends, specifically one who is an English teacher in high school. And she has made it a point that out of the books that she assigns her students to read, and there's 2 books a year where they have to research and write reports, she chooses minority writers intentionally to highlight a group that is often ignored, and so the students have an opportunity to learn about those groups in this English class that, you know, is not history, is not and it's just something that she's done personally. But you bring up an excellent point of, you know, what can we do at the district level to encourage educators to highlight those communities that are emerging communities, and that we're going to be seeing more diversity in our state. And so what is it that educators can do to make sure that we have well-rounded individuals who understand the diversity that we're experiencing? Is there anything else that anybody would like to respond to what was being shared from any of the panelists? Or okay, so the next question actually comes from the audience, and it refers to the to what we're seeing nationally. And so let me just frame it. So after the president of the country first referred to COVID-19 as a Chinese virus, the Asian Pacific Policy and Planning Council said that they saw an increase in reports of incidents against Asian Americans. So can you all talk about the power of words, especially words the leaders use when addressing things to their constituents?
Sure. Well, words, it's in that sense, I personally find it as a way of bullying. It's really impactful in regards of when you have someone who's in leadership role to specify and label such a disease to a group of people, and that influences and impacts communities that are very vulnerable. And it's, I mean, you can just see the impact in regards to the rise of racism, anti-Asian racism, specifically, not even just towards specifically Chinese people, but now anyone who may have look of Chinese. And so it's frustrating, and it's so aggravating when you hear that from someone who has, so much influence for a nation. And it's sad. And it's also a reflection of what our current state of culture is, and it needs to change. It has to change.
Thank you, John.
I agree. Words can be used to hurt, and words can be used to heal. And we want to use correct terminology. And in this instance, we want to use the terms that the federal health professionals develop, and they have given us two choices. One is coronavirus disease, and the other one is COVID, COVID 19. Those are the appropriate and accurate words and terms that should be used in this instance.
Thank you. Jennifer, anything you'd like to add? If not, we'll move to the next question.
You can move to the next question.
Okay, perfect. So Ashley Bath asks if you can share any tips for people who want to be allies to the Asian American community in Oklahoma. And also, if you have an insight on how these people who want to be allies, on ways that they can build trust with these communities that they're not familiar with.
I think the first step is just saying something whenever you hear something that's not appropriate or could come across, because sometimes if you are talking about a certain dissent group, they're typically not in the room, or they may be. But if you could be an ally, say, oh, that doesn't sound right, or, it never has to be a personal attack on anybody, but just to say, I think you really need to check that. Last time I looked, it wasn't that, and that's not true. There are ways to address it without personally attacking the person who's maybe speaking incorrectly. But I think just speaking up and just making a statement about it is usually sufficient enough, I would hope.
I would like to take Ashley, who asked this question. I think this is a very great question, especially for those who wants to be allies to not just the Asian community, but also people of color community, because we are often having the lack of support and also allies to help us get through this. And so some approaches I know I've been looking up ways of allies to help out is whenever you see something, say something, or check up on the person who has been in that situation. Please do not do anything, because that will just further continue and validate that racism and bigotry is still okay. And we, as allies, you cannot let that happen, and you cannot let it continue. And so step in if you can. If it's violent, that's why we have law enforcement. They are here to help provide safety for our citizens. And so feel free to reach out to them. And then if you are not sure what to do, just check on the individual after the situation, depending on how severe it is. Just check on them saying, hey, how are you? Can I walk you to your car if it's at the grocery? Check in on them and see how they're doing, and make sure that you're there to support them. Little things like that really helps a long way. So things like that, and then not only that, just continue informing and educating yourself of ways to handle these situations, because it starts with you, and then from there you'll be able to reach out and share with colleagues, friends, and families of how to go about disarming racism here in the community and also nationally.
I wholeheartedly agree with both responses. My ideas are a little broader in that I think we can help on an individual level as well as on some other levels. For example, we can require or facilitate education and professional development that provides awareness, understanding, and celebration of groups of people who are marginalized, underrepresented, and at risk for being targets of xenophobic attacks. Additionally, in our workplaces, we can have human resources institute guidelines in terms of hiring, benefits, and compensations, which ensures all workers are treated equitably. And then finally, I think on a political, socio-political level, we can encourage and support legislation that combats xenophobic kinds of behaviors, such as hate speech and hate crimes, because these are ways, I think, to make sure that every area is covered so that we can not only reduce this kind of hate behavior and incivility, but also eradicate it.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you to the three of you. I want to follow up on this question because sometimes when we're trying to be supporting allies, we encounter barriers. Sometimes there's cultural barriers, socioeconomic, educational barriers, and sometimes that barrier is language barrier. So if we focus on the last one of language, what are some things that you have seen with members of when you have been an ally, reaching out to communities where there's a language barrier, or when you are part of a community and there has been a language barrier, people who have been allies to you? What are some tips that you would give to individuals and even to organizations who want to reach out and connect, but there are language barriers?
From my personal experience, there's always somebody in the community that wants to help or help bridge that component of things. It's just going to be finding that individual who's willing to help you communicate with that community and have them be a leader. But in all reality, I mean, you make a very valid point, which is not everybody in the community wants to, you know, just volunteer themselves. But it will take some just being able to use social media. I mean, if you're an organization that really wants to focus in on a certain demographic, there are Facebook groups for everything, and using that as a tool and as ammo to bridge out even further.
Anybody else would like to join in this conversation about language barriers and still trying to connect to communities?
Yeah, the language barrier can be very difficult to navigate. And I think going back to what Jennifer said, there is more than likely someone in the community, within that community, who can communicate and navigate the cultural aspects or the language within providing resources, getting information, and things like that. But it's difficult, and I struggle of how to go about finding those individuals, because if you're not familiar with that community, how do you go about doing that? And so, but I think that's probably the first step, is just acknowledging that the community is there and there's a barrier, and how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I often think about my personal experience in trying to be a bridge builder between communities, and I think both of you have highlighted that identifying the leader or the gatekeeper, someone who is bicultural, understands both cultures, is key. And so reaching out to that individual, those individuals is a great first step. And for those individuals who are representing organizations and they want their organization to have that outreach, I have found that depending on the organization side, when there's a job opening, having a preferred bilingual and not qualification, but you know, you would prefer someone who is bilingual, and you can list the languages. And now I say this with the caution that the organization usually has to do a lot of internal work before they're able to have the structure to be inclusive to multicultural, to different cultures and different languages. But just being really intentional about putting that preference, and then doing outreach to community leaders and gatekeepers to find individuals who may want to join the organization. And then that individual can also help once they're onboarded, help. So I want to ask one last question of the panels, and some of you have already highlighted some things, but I want to, if we can just capture it all. How do you think that we can be leaders in challenging bigotry and xenophobia?
I personally think the first step is just to be present and to be heard whenever you hear something that's inaccurate or could be hurtful. You know, as leaders, and if you are a leader, people look up to you, and when they see your demeanor and how you respond, while very professionally and very straightforward, that can make a huge difference in actually, you know, that to the individual that's being targeted, that means the world. To just even have one person speak up for you. But yes, to answer your question, it is just speaking up for that individual and being present and being there. All of our panelists made a good point. Just check on the individual. After this COVID-19, I've had so many friends reach out to me and just ask, how are you doing? Are you okay? And people I typically haven't spoken to in many, many years. So it's been enlightening.
Thank you.
You know, as leaders in challenging racism and bigotry, I think we must be cognizant of identifying it and understanding it. And it is important that we check ourselves. For example, if we view members of a particular group as, for example, taking away jobs from individuals who we think merit employment, but and we harbor hatred of that group, that's an instance of xenophobia. You know, so you may hear people talk in that way. It's a leader's job to bring that to someone's attention. You know, if we classify an entire group of people as terrorists and fear them because of their social identity, we are exhibiting xenophobia. And we must be clear about how it shows up. For example, when we consider all members of a specific identity group as suspicious or dangerous based solely on their race or ethnicity, this is a demonstration of unreasonable fear, and it is a demonstration of xenophobia. So I think leaders must be aware of how it looks and not be caught saying and advancing that type of narrative, but instead arresting it and taking time to share with, to reverse the narrative and show individuals how such irrational thinking and unreasonable behaviors add to the plight of those who are underrepresented, marginalized, and often targets for bigotry and racism.
Thank you.
Okay, so my statement might be very blunt and very, very harsh, I guess. I think, me personally, I think we don't need a challenge because we have been fighting for this for way too long, especially for those who have been in social justice. And we as leaders really, I think this is an opportunity and a time where we can demand for systemic and institutional policy changes that's deeply rooted with racism and bigotry, and demand for transformation, because we need a cultural shift, a societal shift right now. And I think that is very much possible. That way we can provide equity, and also if we don't do anything now, when will we ever do it? And later is too late, because we are all experiencing injustice right now, and it's not fair. It's not fair. And we have the right to demand for these changes, and we have the right to live free from racism and bigotry. And so I encourage those who, especially for you, Moises, in your role with OCCJ, this is such a great opportunity for us to have this conversation. And now I'm really looking forward to what you all have in plan in regards of what kind of programming services you have for the community to combat this. And also for me as a educator, what routes now can I do to help the educational community, the academia community, to really support and stand forward to really eliminate this, because we can't wait for it to be done in the future. It has to be now, and we have a great opportunity to do so.
Thank you, John, for that passionate reminder that all of us need to be doing more. In closing, I would like to highlight some of the takeaways that I have heard all of you mention during our conversation. Starting with the fact that xenophobia has always existed. This is nothing new. We are just seeing an increase right now because of the current situation. And the importance of the role of media in creating a narrative that is either going to hurt or help different communities. Even though we are seeing an increase in reporting on these acts of discrimination, we know that there is a lot of underreporting of these types of incidents. So, which is also even more alarming to know that there's many more instances that we don't know about that are taking place every single day. Microaggressions are real and are hurtful and can be really, really damaging to individuals. In regards to xenophobia and why it's always existed, implicit bias plays such a critical role. And so all of us being aware of our implicit biases is important, because we can either, again, continue potentially continue a hurtful narrative if we're not careful. There's wonderful resources in the community, and we will be sharing this with the group. OU has wonderful resources, after-school programming, summer programming, language classes. Jennifer mentioned supporting minority-owned businesses, specifically in this instance, grocery stores, and just being there as an ally, supporting them, and then just kind of taking a pulse of what the patrons of those businesses are, and then the other takeaway for me was the need for more curriculum that highlights the emerging communities in Oklahoma, and just helping all students throughout the state be better educated about that. And then I think this just came time and time again, the power of words. And then how we are leaders in challenging bigotry and xenophobia. We, all of you talked about things that we can do personally, of reaching out to our friends who may be of Asian descent, of speaking up if we ever encounter an incident of discrimination. Many of you, all of you also mentioned things that we can do at the organizational level. Asking leaders for those anti-harassment policies and other policies that are going to protect everyone within our organization, and then things that we need to do systemically, and as individuals and as community members, collectively holding our leaders accountable, and thanking them when appropriate for taking care of all members of the community. So thank you all so very much for your time, for your expertise, for your candid remarks, as we try to navigate through these very difficult times and to try to understand how we can better be community members of all members of our community. So with that, I want to turn it back over to Avery for some last closing remarks.
Yes, again, I just want to reiterate what Moises said. Thank you again for being a part of our panel. And this has been really informative for me, and I'm sure for everyone else watching as well, just to know how we can better help the Asian community here in Tulsa and just in general, and how we can better be prepared to address any xenophobia that we come across, and how we can understand the xenophobia that we ourselves might unintentionally be sharing with others. And so I thank you for that. And I just wanted to mention that the World Health Organization they've stopped naming diseases after places.
Avery, you got muted. You just got muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Thank you so much. I'm sorry.
You're fine.
And I don't think we mentioned this, not that I recall, but the World Health Organization put out a statement saying that they were not naming any viruses or anything else after places because of the xenophobia and the discrimination that come from that. And, you know, that is sort of like a step that they were able to see in their policies to make sure that they are mitigating any discrimination towards any group. And I would just say if there's any way that you can look at, or anyone who's watching, if there's any way that you can look at any of your own policies or systems that are in place or anything like that, and you see, is there anything that we can do to make sure that we are not part of this, you know, perpetrating discrimination towards any group? You know, that's something that everyone should always do for any policy for any group. And again, this has been a you know, a timely conversation and an important conversation. And again, I just want to thank you all for being here. And if you all want to keep up with OCCJ and what we're doing, you can go to our website, which is www.occjok.org. You can follow our social medias on Facebook and on Instagram, and we updated with all of our programs there. And I hope that you all you know, keep connected to us and keep coming back to our programs.